Brawlin Edwards is a World War II veteran from Summerville who allegedly was tortured by his own military leaders. In this edition of Quintin's Close-Ups, I sit down with T Owens, the author of Burn, Conversations with a World War II Veteran, one-on-one. And be sure to download the free Quintin's Close-Ups app in your Apple or Google Play stores.
Well, Michael, it is so good to see you.
You too.
I appreciate this.
Thanks for having me here.
Anytime. And we're talking about the obvious, Burn, Conversations with a Black WWII Veteran, obviously World War II Veteran. What conversations are you having right now about that?
Well, there's a number of conversations. There's conversations I've had with the actual veteran, who I'm now great friends with. But there's also a broader conversation of the actual content of what's been going on with him. He's 95 years old now. He's been fighting for all of his benefits since the early 40s. There's a lot of atrocities that happened to him while he was in the Army. And that's kind of what this book deals with, his journey, dealing with those things mentally, physically, emotionally, politically. So when you say conversation, there's a number of conversations that have been just going on that surround what's happened to him.
And you talk about him trying to fight for really disability since the 40s to now. Okay, what is your definition of the government? How do you define the government now?
How do I define it, or how is it defined in his terms? Well, personally, I think the government, and it's everything I think about in terms of this, is in relation to him. You know, when you're a veteran, you think, I'm serving our country, I'm serving our government. The least I can expect is just for them to take care of me. You know, you risk your life, especially during that time when, you know, one or two wrong moves and we all be speaking entirely different languages right now in World War II. But you think that they're going to care for their veterans. So as a citizen, I assumed the same thing. So when I heard his story and how he was tested on, you know, chemical testing, gas chamber, a number of things, that changed my definition of government. That's when I decided, wow, it's not what you really think it is. What you think, the type of truths that you think are true might not be necessarily positive. People that you assume would help you, and especially in something of this situation, you learn maybe not so much. You learn that there's ulterior motives, different agendas, and very few of them actually have the people involved in mind. It's more so of, let's cover our back, let's cover our own interests, and that's kind of changed my entire view of the government, and especially how they treat veterans.
From Amazon.com, it says this quote: World War II veteran Brawlin Edwards sat before the Federal Board of Veterans' Appeals wearing a long overcoat, black beret, and dark glasses. It wasn't a fashion statement, but a necessity for protecting his hypersensitive skin from the cool air conditioning. The previous night, his skin had began deteriorating. The previous night, the skin had began deteriorating, that is, literally falling off his body into small piles on the hotel carpet. Blood, rotten skin, the smell. Army officials had threatened him with prison if he ever discussed what happened to him at Camp Claiborne, Louisiana. So what happened?
Well, the short version, because, you know, like I said, this has been going on. When he was a young man, maybe early 20s, he was drafted to the Army. He had a very high IQ, but at that time, African Americans didn't matter what your IQ was. You were still just going to be building bridges, digging ditches, things of that nature. So they sent him to kind of train other soldiers how to read and write, things like that. After that was over, he didn't really have much to do. So before he knew it, someone just said, hey, get on this truck. And when you're in the Army, you don't ask questions. You just do what they say do. That's just the nature, that's the culture of the Army.
Exactly.
But he did ask, well, where am I going? I don't know, just get on the truck. He got on the truck. And just to speed up the story, he ended up, his first time at basic training, they said, roll up your sleeve, go in that room, and they shot him with mustard gas, on his arm. This is part of a top secret test, by the way, chemical testing. Shortly after that, they said, get back on the truck, go down further down the road, walk in that room, gas comes out, and it's a mustard gas chamber. So when it says in that excerpt that his skin was falling off, it's because those toxins, those chemicals, those chemical agents are still in his body, and they ignite at any given time. And some of the effects is his skin falls off, literally, just comes off. So that excerpt was him sitting in court trying to argue his case with his skin falling off, blood the night before. It was so bad that the judge, you would never see this, the judge actually came off the bench and showed sympathy for him because she had never seen anything like that. So that excerpt is kind of him at that moment sitting there with this thing raging in his body, just hoping just to get all his benefits. At that time, that was 1997, he was still fighting. Now, the imprisonment part was, he would have talked about it much earlier, but they threatened him in the Army. If you ever talk about this, during that time, it was a lot of segregation, discrimination. I mean, as an African American, you don't know what's going to happen. The government said, don't talk. He didn't talk. 50 years later, when things became declassified, top secret things became declassified, he was able to kind of speak up and fight for all of his conversation. Now, the sad part is that he applied in the early 90s, but this started when he was in the 1940s, 50 years prior.
Right.
They're kind of saying, okay, from 1990s up, we'll do what we're supposed to do. We'll give you your benefits. However, that 50-year gap that they told him not to talk about, they've denied it. Records have burned up. People have, coming out of office. Things have happened. He's still fighting for that right now. And it's just a sad thing.
You talk about sad thing, you talk about right now. Where is his heart right now?
It's going through the gamut, as you can imagine. When it first happened, it was full of hate, bitterness, the type of mentality that I've done everything I can do. I've done what they told me to do. I've served my country. I put my life on the line. And this happens to me. Why is this happening to me? It's gone from that to he doesn't blame the actual government. He blames the people that were actually doing the testing. Then it kind of switches to, well, the government ordered them to do. So his emotions and his stance runs the gamut. But right now, I'm actually shocked at how easygoing he is, how friendly he is, how he's willing to talk to anyone about what happened to him. But he does, like any human being, have his moments when he scratches constantly and skin is just, it's a lot of it is rotten, and it comes back. So at that time, I'm sure he's thinking, why me? But he's in pretty good spirits, believe it or not, relatively speaking.
You go back to the time when he says, obviously when the government declassified all that information. I'm wondering this, who was the first person he told his story to?
The first person he told it to was probably his mom, his parents. There was no way to explain it. The day he came back from war, his face was boils and burns, distorted. His skin, his neck, everything. So what are you gonna do? Your mom has been worried about you the entire time on your way. You come home, and this is what you look like.
Right.
He had no choice but to at least kind of give her a heads up, and she just screamed, "What happened to my baby?" Things that you can imagine a mom saying.
Right.
After that, only his closest confidants he would even mention it to. But he always had that fear. I don't know what the government's going to do. I'm going to get locked up. I don't know what's going to happen. So he never really talked about it.
And I know that when you actually finished the book, that is, he approved of it.
Oh.
But according to Berkeley Independent, his wife basically had a lot of emotions. Talk to me about that encounter.
Imagine, and now when you say encounter, I've spent a lot of time with him since 2012. So I've come to know him. I mean, he's just a regular guy to me. But she cried when she first read it because several reasons. One, she said I did an excellent job, which that made me proud because this is not an easy story, right? Another reason is that it reminded them of all these little details that they might have suppressed or forgotten. This brings it all back up, and she's reliving. She's the one who had to sweep up his skin off the floor. She's the one who has to change his bloody sheets every night. She's the one that has to keep these meticulous records because she'll tell you right now she doesn't really trust the government either at this point. So she keeps meticulous records. She's with him day in and day out, taking him to these hospitals. This has been going on. I came in on the tail end of it. So it was an honor that she approved of it. It was definitely an honor that he approved of it. And it even reminds him of some of the things he had tried to forget about, but just couldn't.
And you talk about the things that people are being reminded of every day. I know let me return back to the article from the Berkeley Independent, because it says this, quote, Owens, who's black, recognizes the timelessness of this book and Edwards' testimony. It's been just 2 years since a self-proclaimed white supremacist killed 9 worshipers, that is, at Mother Emanuel AME Church, just blocks away from here to College of Charleston.
Right.
Most recently, incidents in Charlottesville, Virginia, where white supremacists rallied against the removal of the Confederate Army General Robert E. Lee, have brought to the forefront other monuments honoring slave opponents like John C. Calhoun on Calhoun Street in Charleston. This is a crazy question, and I know you've already published this book right now, and it'll probably take a while for you to read it, publish another book. But if you were to do an ebook, what would you add to this?
I would focus a little bit more on, you talked about the Confederate flag and whatnot. Believe it or not, Mr. Edwards lives in a predominantly all-black neighborhood, but he has a white woman who's one of his neighbors, and she has a flag pole of the Confederate flag in her front yard, right next door to him. So when I think of that and just what he's gone through, and he wakes up every day and he sees this flag there, just the emotions that he sees. But there was a time when he and I were walking downtown, just up the road, and I just thought to myself, you have the John C. Calhoun statue right there, you've got the old slave market here, you've got A&B down. It all came down to me that, wow, we've made a lot of progress. For me to be even having him come speak to a class about what happened to him, but we still have a long way to go. So I would add more of kind of the timeliness of what's currently happening. But of course, as soon as you write that, something else happens, and as soon as you write that, something else happens. So, but overall, I think people get the general idea that we have a long way to go. We've come a long way, but we still have a long way to go.
And let me talk to you about the future, because the article from the Berkeley Independent also says this, quote, and meaning you, he's also started a nonprofit entitled Voices Speak that is dedicated to giving voices to the voiceless using novels or other media platforms.
Right.
Where will your voice take you to next?
Honestly, I want to capture more African American World War II veterans' voices. Just World War II veterans in general, they're dying every day. They're late 80s, early 90s, late 90s. So, but you don't hear a lot about first-hand encounters of African American soldiers during one of probably the most brutal wars we ever had. So one project we want to work on is just kind of recording their histories, having them talk, the same process I did with him, as well as other marginalized people in society, the disabled, other minorities. I just want to be able to allow them platforms to kind of get their voices heard. There's over 7 billion people in the world, and every voice isn't equitable, every voice isn't equal for either a power struggle or suppression or oppression, whatever the reasons might be. Our organization, Voices Speak, is going to help get those voices out. So there's billions of people, but we're just trying to do our part with the few stories that we can either publish through books or documentaries, whatever it might be.
Let me return to the book, because once someone puts this book down, Burn, Conversations with a Black World War II Veteran, what do you want them to say?
Well, I want them to say and when I say enjoyed it, they were informed. They not enjoyed what happened, but just enjoyed the way the story was crafted, because this story is his story, but it's through my perspective of meeting him and how, as he's telling me the story, things that I'm thinking, things that I'm experiencing, in addition to what he experienced in the past, present, and hopefully in the future. Secondly, I want them to just realize that there's a lot of people that have given to this country that you just don't even know about. So we hear a lot of stories about World War II.
Right.
Very few are African American based. When over 1 million African Americans have served in World War II.
Wow.
I consider myself in the know. I thought I knew a lot about just things, but when I met him, I said, wow. All I know is what the mainstream media has said about African American war, Buffalo Soldiers, Tuskegee Airmen.
Right.
The usuals.
Right.
I don't know the actual one-on-one details of just a regular guy from Summerville, South Carolina, what he went through. So I want them to say, wow, when I say thanks for your service, now I really know what just one man's service entails. And so I just want them to enjoy it and just be informed.
Okay.
Mhm.
Well, Michael T. Owens, thank you so much for your time. I really
Thank you.
appreciate this.
Thank you.
Thank
Appreciate
you.
your time.
Anytime.